Morning, Cowboy Jim, Northern Alberta. And I, this day, sat out back having a coffee and a smoke and pondered the stuff that is on my YouTube channel, not just mine, but everybody else's, and all the comments that were made. I listened to Ron Hardy. I think it might be Bruce Pardy. Super intelligent guy. Really good commentary, about an hour long, and he was delineating where he saw. He's a learned professor, and so on, and he was delineating where we are in our application of law and order. And I I think that law and order has changed quite remarkably from when I was a kid. And I will be 76 come this October. And when I was 11, having been born in 49, so 1960, I had the privilege of um, working in the arcades at a little place called Wasaga Beach on the main street. And just as a footnote, um, each side of the street was owned by a different mafia family back then. Simple. Everyone knew it. No one commented on it. It was just a fact of life. So as an 11-year-old, I would work in my dad's campground at night, uh, doing whatever, and I would do the morning up till afternoon shift in a little hamburger stand. Prior to that, I set up pins in the bowling alley that was right beside the little hamburger place, and I had the privilege and the honor of having a lady who didn't speak the way I was used to, um, having someone speak to me. I was 11, and she would be in her 30s or 30s probably, and her name was Helen, and she uh, taught me how to wash dishes. I, I I do wash my own dishes. I have a dishwasher, not a person. I have a machine. I don't use it. I prefer um, doing dishes the old-fashioned way. But Helen taught me how to wash dishes and how to serve people. Well, my mom also taught me how to work. My um, dad taught us how to honor and people. And we did. That was our nature. Now, in making this video, it goes back to a thing I saw today. Uh, Justin Trudeau made a statement, and he said, "It is all right that Canadians have guns for hunting and for practice, target practice. And they could hunt with those guns, but they could not use those guns to defend themselves in their own home if their home were going through a home invasion." He said, "You're not allowed to kill people." Um, So let's go back to when I was a kid, and I asked my sister. She was 13 months older than I, and we worked in the same little snack bar, hamburger joint as each other. We worked together, not at the same time, different shifts, so on like that. And Helen was the lady who taught us everything that we needed to know on making hamburgers, washing dishes, all those things. As I said, Helen didn't speak in a normal manner. Um, I contacted my sister because I like to have a second opinion uh, to freshen my memory. And I asked my sister, "Do you remember Helen from the hamburger joint?" She said, "Yes, I do." And I said, "Well, could you please tell me everything you can so that I know that I am giving an honest, fair appraisal of what my memory is remembering?" She said, "No." I said, "Why not?" You know, she said, "Because I do not want to remember terrible, horrible things that have happened." Personally, I think it's good to remember, not to dwell on it, but to remember so that you can recognize what another person is going through and perhaps intervene. That's that's a male way of thinking about it. Um, Helen, so no help from my sister at all. Helen had a beautiful daughter, um, blonde, blue-eyed, long blonde hair. I was 11. Okay, that girl was real pretty, real pretty. Um, she had a problem, and I didn't know what the problem was with Helen. She ignored me uh, unless she were looking right at me. I didn't know. No one told me that she was deaf, and thus she read lips. And no one told me. Her daughter was also deaf, but her daughter couldn't speak at all. She whether it was because of what she had been through, she didn't speak. Helen tried to speak as a person would who um, couldn't hear what she herself was sounding like. She was deaf. Okay, so let's get down to the horror that I remember. This is Wasaga Beach, 1960. And we're looking at this, I choose to look at this, to give you an example of how our legal system has changed. It's changed. Helen went home one day early, and the red truck was parked in front. We used to have milk, uh, bread delivered door to door. That's you didn't just go to the grocery store to buy a loaf of bread. They they brought it right to your door. And one of the joys was my mom would always buy a giant tub of ice cream. I prefer chocolate. Okay. Um, if there are any kids watching, please, kids, don't watch this. Okay. Don't watch this. Um, Helen went home. The bread truck was at the front door. Her husband was in house, and her daughter. Helen also had a boy, a younger boy. When Helen, I don't even know if they had a car, possibly, but Helen started to climb the stairs going into their little cabin that they rented. I can still remember where it was on Highway 92, um, right down near the bridge. And um, Helen went in as the bread man was walking out. And the bread man was doing up his belt and zipper. Helen didn't speak well, um, but she was not stupid, and she studied. Okay, Helen walked in the front door of their cabin. It was a cabin, it wasn't a cottage. It was a rental, it was a cabin. Bed right in the middle of the kitchen area. I can imagine they had toilet, but who knows back then. And Helen saw her 11-year-old daughter sitting on the end of the bed, adjusting her skirt dress, summer frock. It was a dress, not a skirt, I'm told. And Helen looked at her husband and said, "What have you done with our daughter?" He was kind of speechless because he had traded bread from the bread man so that he, the bread man, could have sex with their 11-year-old deaf and dumb baby girl. Pretty, pretty. Helen didn't say a word. She walked past her husband to the counter, kitchen counter by the sink, where there was a very large butcher knife. Helen concealed that as best she could, and she walked back past her husband, stopped, and plunged the knife into his heart, killed him. I don't honestly, I, I don't think that he had a heart. He behaved in an evil manner. So he hit the floor, and Helen cradled her daughter, who had been sexually used and abused for what would seem to be a long time. Now, Helen somehow um, took the phone and called the Ontario Provincial Police. And they came, and she explained to them what she had done. She simply said, "I killed my husband because," and she delineated why she had killed her husband. So they took Helen into custody, and they took the 11-year-old baby girl who had lost her virginity to her dad, only God himself knows when. And her young son in into child services, and they took Helen to jail, and she stayed in jail. Um, I can't remember. This is where I wish my sister would have helped me. I can't remember the days, stuff like that. I just knew what I heard. You see, my mom uh, had a hairdressing shop, so trust me, we got to hear everything from our community of 300 people in the winter, 50,000 to 75,000 in the summer, but 300 in the winter. So we were as well informed as the gossip would allow us to be. So back in those days, there were no uh, great um, uh, court cases going on unless you had an awful lot of money, an awful lot of money. Helen, she all she had left were her was her daughter and her son. She had killed her husband. The court case was very, very, very quick, and I heard that almost everyone, every family at Wasaga Beach, um, was represented that day in court, and the judge, they brought Helen in handcuffs and so on, and because she had killed her husband, and and the judge said, "Helen, how do you plead?" And Helen, she read lips, and so as long as she could see the judge, she knew what he was asking, and she said guilty. The judge said, I mean, everyone in the courtroom was watching intently. Okay. Um, he said, Helen, what are you pleading guilty for? And Helen said, I killed my husband. And he said, Helen, why did you kill your husband? And Helen, in her, I would like to say broken English, but foreign sounding English, monotone, all that, the way a person speaks who is deaf. And she answered. She told him in the courtroom exactly why she had killed her husband because he had turned their 11-year-old daughter for for bread. Okay, dear Lord, no one knew about the milkman, and so the judge staring around the courtroom, she said, or he said, Helen, um, I accept your plea of guilty. Um, you're going to hang. He said, Helen, do you understand that? And Helen said, yes. But, but she said, I killed him. And the judge said, this was really happening. They didn't bring the bread man in because I'm sure someone would probably have killed him. I don't know what happened to that man. I I I think he changed bread routes. Okay, tried not to go anywhere near Wasaga. So let's consider Helen's options. Well, in Scripture it says the truth. will set you free. Well, in actual fact, sometimes the truth will incarcerate you. So the judge, he wanted to make real certain that Helen understood the result of her um, putting that butcher knife in her husband's chest. And so he was very clear, and but he was paying a lot of attention to the rest of the people in the courtroom as well as Helen. Back then, justice was meted out. I love old English, measured out, meted out, implemented, that sort of thing, quickly. From the time that Helen pled guilty would be 2 to 3 weeks until she, Helen, would be hanged. My prayer is that I am remembering well. I believe I am. The judge said to Helen, I accept your plea. And you you know what is going to have to happen. Helen would have to forfeit her life. So we had law and order back then. There was not a year and a half out on bail before the blood dried on the floor. That sort of evil. The judge said, and he looked around the courtroom, he said, Helen, you're guilty. I accept your plea. Your sentence could only be to hang. But that judge, he understood law and order. He sure understood his neighbors. Uh, he said, Helen, where are your kids? And Helen looked at the police officer who had brought her in. The jail was right next door to the community center where the court case was held. And um, the judge asked the policeman, said, they're in social services. And the judge said, Helen, you're guilty. And you're going to have to pay. And the judge said, Helen, you're going to pay with time served. Helen had been in jail for 2, perhaps 3 days. The judge said, Helen, go get your kids. Called the policeman, you take Helen, you get her kids back. And that was called justice. I I watched Justin Trudeau that I I don't know how to describe our former prime minister. I don't know how to describe our present prime minister except uh, evil intended people. S- Seems to be the way it is. Uh, Justin Trudeau was being interviewed, and the reporter asked him about gun restrictions and all that sort of stuff. And Trudeau said, "Well, Canadians can hunt, but," and he said, "most of them abide by the law." But he said, "We're going to take guns away from those who don't use them." Um, my dad's favorite 22 was a Browning lever action 22. Uh, they're no longer allowed in Canada. Trudeau, in his deity, self proclaimed narcissism, has even banned 30-30 rifles because they hold more than five shells. I I think of where we are at now, and it is best demonstrated in this next little short statement. Trudeau said people in Canada can hunt, but they are not allowed to shoot in self defense in their own home if their home is being invaded. You're not allowed. You're not allowed because some criminal might die. Well, I was brought up uh, with many people in our community who I respected. It used to be that you respected a preacher, and it used to be that you respected a police officer. And I was privileged to have a mother who knew how to fight and a dad that didn't. And so my mom sent me to judo school, and my instructor was a police officer, and he and I became decent friends. I started judo, I guess we're somewhere between 12 and 14, stuck with it for about 10 years, on and off, how you go through different phases. And my judo instructor taught me um, martial arts, and he taught me way more than that. And he taught me little things like if you shoot someone who is breaking in your back door, grab them, drag them right down the stairs, and shoot them again. Huh. We had it wasn't a cowboy culture. This was at Wasaga Beach in Ontario, but we had a definite respect for law and order. Many people did things wrong. Don't get me wrong. I mean, most everybody poached, hunted deer out of season, all that sort of stuff. Um, Hunting licenses, well, some people had hunting licenses. I myself and the guys that I hung out with, we did our hunting license when we turned 14, 3-night course, and it was good. But we already knew how to hunt anyways. Okay, so Canada has changed. There's no way to get around that. Law and order no longer exists to protect the victim. Nowadays, if someone is assaulted, um, and they're in the hospital getting stitched up, if they survived a home invasion or any carjacking, anything, and they manage to survive the attack, and they, as victims, are in the hospital getting stitched up, the criminal is quite often out on bail before the last stitch goes in. And that is because there has developed a confusion between the guilty and the innocent. And I have said this for, I said this to a police officer in a video. I said, you're going to get paid the same whether you do your job or not. You're going to get paid the same. I said, for crying out loud, please do your job. Well, nowadays, people don't even know how to work, let alone um, behave. And so, our law and order, it's changing. Here in Alberta, there is a movement afoot for independence from Canada and the restrictive gun laws, GST, carbon tax, excessive income tax. The idea that in Alberta we send, I think it's 66 or 70 billion dollars in equalization payments to Ottawa. They drivel about 33 billion back so that we can run our province, and the rest, I think 16 billion, is given to Quebec to keep them happy, and they should be happy. And the rest, East Coast, and um, fulfilling the government's lauder. Used to be a cooler, ice cooler, a lauder, um, and the West is through with that. I had the privilege and the honor of spending a few nights at the Coots, Montana border, sleeping in my old Dodge truck. Uh, Chilly. I think it was November. There's a little snow, but not much, and nice and Alberta. So nice and warm during the day, and right seriously chilly at night. And I watched Law and Order that was and is, unfortunately, still is weaponized by a political party, a federal government, primarily liberals, too many conservatives who don't understand. I, I stagger at this. Um, they don't understand the basic concept that as a politician, they are actually supposed to represent the people. And it used to be said when a politician goes to Ottawa, um, they forget where they came from. And all they have to do is get reelected time and time and time again. I remember watching maybe 40, 50, 60 RCMP shoulder to shoulder, standing across the road to the Montana border. I mean, they were going to protect, uh, I guess, Donald Trump, who knows? But, anyways, they were there with the sole purpose of criminalization of freedom of speech. Well, our speech may be free to the people listening, but it's not free. We have so many corrupted political leaders within the system, even within the system of the RCMP. Used to be, boy, I'll tell you, as a citizen of Canada, if I had seen 40 years ago an officer being assaulted, I would have stopped my truck and intervened on behalf of the officer. I would probably have to take half an hour and pray about it now because when you sell your soul to evil, there is a price to be paid. So at the Coots, Montana border, um, the federal government of Canada implemented, I think it was called the War Measures Act, Emergencies Act, whatever. And all the Freedom Convoy wanted was the right to be vaccinated or not. That's all. The Freedom Convoy, they were not telling people what they should do, except they were saying, I want to choose for my own body. I remember getting a censoring from YouTube when I mentioned COVID. I mean, you weren't allowed to have an opinion. Your free speech was curtailed because it had to line up with the political um, regime that was quashing Canadian rights and freedoms. It's the way it was. Okay, let's bring this full circle. Helen killed her husband. The legal system let Helen serve and let her go free because of the circumstances that anyone with a brain would understand. And she should have been set free to tend to her own children. I look at my entry and I remember a Muslim guy on the bus some time ago. He said, Jim, so if your home gets broken into, you have to wake up, run to the gun cabinet, choose a weapon of self defense. You have to open another area in the safe where you can acquire uh, um shells, ammunition. You have to assemble that, and then you can defend yourself against a home invasion person. And he looked at me, like, are you that stupid? Well, I suppose in many ways we are that stupid because we reelected a liberal government who has a history of running roughshod over Canadian people. It's the way it is. Okay. So this is a channel that I have dedicated to God. But that does not mean that I don't have an opinion, especially when it comes to right and wrong. But I will never forget when I understood that I needed to say a simple prayer to the Creator. It went like this: God, please forgive me. I am so sorry for having lived the way I have. I recognize that Jesus Christ is your Son, that He, Jesus, suffered, bled, and died on the cross for my sins. Help me to be what you want me to be. I I used to enjoy Wasaga Beach. We had a lot of American tourists, and I really liked American money. Um, when I was 5 years old, I already knew who God was. Didn't know what he was, but I knew there was a God. I knew there were only two people on earth who loved me, one, my mom, and the other God. So I talked to them both. And but I loved American money. Not because we were poor. We worked, okay? I mean, we worked. I started working for money when I was 11. Okay, at home, I'd been working a long time. Sure wasn't for money. It was for shelter, uh, room and board, if you will. But the reason I loved American money was it stated right on the money, in God we trust. So I strongly encourage abide by the law, no matter if it is a mockery of justice. Be obedient to police officers. Hey, when all those officers down at Coots, Montana, lined up shoulder to shoulder to stop the Freedom Convoy, we had a Sunday morning church service. I even got to speak at it a tiny bit. And um, we sang, Oh, Canada. Half the officers that were there refused to remove their hats. The lady officers, no need for them to. Men should have, real men. But we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities in high places. We do. Unfortunately, that means the government. We wrestle against the encroachment on our freedoms, the right to speak, to bear arms, to vote. That's what we in Alberta are getting ready to do. We, a very large number of people, are getting ready to vote for independence from Canada. Canada is getting ready to implement the Emergencies Act, the War Measure Act. I cannot believe that the federal government will allow Alberta to separate and become independent, given that Canada cannot survive without Alberta, without Alberta's money. And it's so strange. Canada does everything in their power, federal government of Canada, do everything possible to hamper, curtail, eliminate the very uh, development of our natural resources, which gives Canada enough money to live on, especially Quebec, Ontario, where their voting chooses the government. And out here, we have no say. But here, Canada cannot survive without Alberta. But Alberta will prosper without Canada. So you and only you will determine your perspective on politics and all that, the legal system, all that. But you and only you will determine where you spend eternity. If you humble yourself and pray and ask God to forgive you, you will be guaranteed. It's really nice if you'd smarten up also and try to behave well, okay? But you humble yourself and pray and ask Jesus Christ into your heart, you'll be guaranteed entry into heaven. If not, um, you're pretty screwed, okay? Okay, old cowboy. Um, Getting ready to go back for 7 days come Wednesday, and God loves you. There is an intimation in Scripture that we have the quality of government that we deserve because we will do nothing about it. We in Alberta are polite, but we do not need stand on a stage as many rock groups do and establish that they haven't lost what's behind their zipper. Okay? We don't need to do that. We know what being men, strong women, and intelligent children of the West is all about. Okay, choose ye now whom you will serve. It's up to you. Well, God bless you. Y'all take care. Thank you.